everyone. I'm Gabor Herman, and welcome to the BioFocus online conference. And special thanks to Banu and Patricia for the invitation and the fantastic organization. I'm going to talk about a topic that might be very interesting to you. Let me share my slides and let's get started. So my topic is how to integrate orthodontics and craniofacial functional medicine into medicine. And I'm starting with the introduction because I think I have to introduce how I got into the point that I'm talking about these functional issues and functional medicine. So I am an orthodontist in Budapest, practicing sleep dentistry as well. And over the last years, I got involved in craniofacial functional teamworks, and I got interested in how this teamwork can be organized and in a systematic manner. And I got to the point that it is not about teeth and face, but it is much more than this. And this is what I would like to share with you today. So, well, this is a very interesting time that we live. The new normal. So actually there's new pictures introducing what the new normal can be or should be, or we might believe that it is. So just look at the picture how dentists are practicing today in many offices in a full isolation. So this is a very demanding time. It is a very challenging time. And I would say this is a catalyst for different processes that has been going on, but it is going to be aggravated by these kind of conditions that we have today. If you look at this billboards, this is very funny. A dentist in the US started to use this opportunity to promote orthodontics. And you see that in the statistics, at least, that not only orthodontic treatment can get popular during this time, but cosmetic treatments in general. So many cosmetic clinics all over the US and internationally report that people can go now to a plastic surgeon because they don't have to show up with swollen faces, so they can hide themselves during the recovery time. So, well, this is a nice time for doing aesthetic treatments. But what is next when there is going to be an existential question, what to select? So if we just look at the picture, what orthodontics is about right now, so we have the conventional treatments, so many debates, of course, and there are cosmetic treatments as well. Mostly, I'm talking about Invisalign and invisible treatment. So this is what had been going on before COVID. And it might look funny, but this is somehow what COVID brought to us, like do-it-yourself haircuts and funny end-ups of this kind of attempts. But if we talk about do-it-yourself, there is something like do-it-yourself kind of orthodontics in the US especially, and it is called on-demand aligners or direct-to-customer aligners. And this is a great challenge to the orthodontic specialty, especially in the US. But we don't have to be a magician to imagine that it is gonna continue because people are going to be very price sensitive after COVID. And if you look at this report from the AJODO this year, this is quite interesting. Like this report wanted to observe how the people perceive the difference between an orthodontic specialist and the dentist who is practicing orthodontics. And they found that there is no difference in the lay people eyes. So this is a kind of an important factor that we should take into consideration when we project the future of the orthodontic specialty. So we can say that on the one hand, because of the direct-to-customer aligners, on the other hand, because of the public perception between the difference, from the GP versus orthodontic specialist point, that not only the cosmetic part of the orthodontic market is going to grow on the one hand, but move out from the orthodontic specialties control, but both the conventional as well. And we can suspect that as soon as people will have economical challenges, they will postpone those kind of cosmetic treatments that are not essential from the health perspective. But something else has happened as well during COVID. So if you look at the statistics, how many people are shifting to consuming local food and just looking at what the tag is containing. So they started to be more health conscious. And this is a good sign. This is a good sign that there is something like health-oriented market. The people will get more conscious about how to look at their health, how to improve their health, how to be more resilient to these kind of challenges like a virus. And this is somehow not new, so it is going to be aggravated, but it is going on for many years. And it was reported last year in the AGOD as well, because they will make a way how to just kind of gathering information, how people are making decisions about an orthodontic treatment. And on the one hand, definitely it was supported that adults are looking for the shortest, the cheapest, and the least visible solution. But for the kids, they were very much interested in the health feature of the orthodontic treatment. So it was suggested by this article that it should be highlighted to the parents when they want to make a decision. So we can say that health is going to be the new normal. So health consciousness is going to be something that we can use, we can add to the orthodontic future. So my lecture today is about how we can use this information. I will talk about 3 steps. I will talk about the 3 topics. The first is almost the most important part. So how we can define health in the orthodontic specialty. And based on this information and all the other new features of the orthodontic specialty, I would like to place a new fundamental for the orthodontic specialty for the future. And certainly we are talking about biofocus and Vilma Simoa's work. So I will talk about this as well in the 3rd part. So let's get started. So what does health mean to the orthodontic specialty? If you ask an orthodontist, you usually get the answers like this. So, well, we need the orthodontic treatment to support the periodontal health. We need to gain functional occlusion. We need to preserve and improve the appropriate functions around the oral cavity and oral health, certainly. But what is the main definition of this? So how can we go into details? What does it really mean functional health in the orthodontic specialty? So when I go beyond periodontal health, because of course it is obvious if there is a premature contact, it can make a risk to the periodontal health. But if we look at the definition of functional occlusion, we'll find a very interesting definition. Dawson Academy is one of the highest ranked implantologic school or dental school in the US or internationally. So, so this is very interesting how they look at functional occlusion. This seems very obvious, no sign of instability. So this is very obvious. The second point is like functional occlusion, is that functional appropriately for the individual? Again, this is absolutely obvious. And the list below that is again declaring. So occlusal wear, migration, sore muscle, tooth loss, and tooth that getting loose, or TMD symptoms are the ones that you don't want to see in a mouth that functioning occlusally or occlusal, in which functional occlusion is present. So this is really obvious. But if you just continue this kind of description, you will find a very interesting addition, because this definition continues like interesting that sometimes patients don't look like textbooks. So it does mean that not necessarily ideal occlusion will function well. So functional occlusion does not necessarily mean that we have to set an ideal occlusion. So this is very important. So not only ideal occlusions will serve the patients from the functional perspective. And if you just look at the Dozen Academy site, you will find a very interesting addition as well. So then they start talk about not only CRCO, but airway health, general inflammation, and how they are connected to temporomandibular joint disorders. So this is very interesting how they opened the scope much broader definition to health. And the other investigation of mine was to look at FDI, so how they define oral health, because FDI is the highest meaning of the dental population. So I thought that it is really the absolute definition what I should take into consideration. And this is, again, this is very obvious what it is stating over here. So multifaceted feature that includes speech, smile, smell, taste, touch, chewing and swallow. So this is oral and craniofacial, orofacial function. This is obvious, but again, it continues the way that the oral health is influenced by different values that are coming from very far or remote from the oral cavity. So we talk about physiological, social, psychological attributes, and individuals changing experiences, perception, expectations. So this is not like there is something isolated oral health. And if you look at this chart, it tells almost everything. So here is something that comes as an external problem or external determinant. And then all these psychosocial factors, the conditions, and the physiological function, and the psychosocial conditions will make up the total issue, what it is called oral health, and the perception of the problems in the oral cavity. So this is very interesting. And if you take into consideration the muscular and fascia connections, it makes sense. So there is nothing like isolated oral cavity from the muscular perspective. There is nothing like isolated oral cavity from the functional perspective. Or if you look at this chart or this figure, that that is obvious in the anatomic and physiologic books, because this is how the oral and facial area is represented in the central nervous system and the cortical complex. So this is a highly important area on the one hand, and it is tightly interconnected to the entire body. And well, finally, if we just take the textbooks, the orthodontic textbooks into consideration, we also see these kind of connections. So the etiology of malocclusion is not like is written in the gene, kind of, because certainly heredity and congenital issues are listed, but then you will see so many other factors that are ultimately related to the human body in general. So this is not like isolated or can be isolated from the entire body. And if we talk about the genes, again, this is something new from the time when the orthodontic definition had been written. The DNA or the genes are not solo responsible factors for the development of malocclusions and facial malformations. So this is highly defined and highly influenced by the environment. So this is how we can make a conclusion based on this. So when we talk about the health topic, the functional topic in the orthodontic specialty, these are the conclusions what we can make based on the definitions around orthodontics from dentistry, from the FDI, from the functional occlusion perspective, and from the anatomy books. So this is, I mean, the human body is a fully interconnected system. So occlusion, the craniofacial complex, cannot be separated. So it is, it's just a myth that we can separate this from the human body. And consequently, there is nothing like isolated craniofacial functional health, because it is highly related to the general health. And this is just a myth that we can deal and we can treat patients' teeth and bones isolatedly from the entire body. So either we don't know what we cause, or we are lucky because the patient can tolerate and compensate the issues what we cause, but this is not like, there is no side effect. So this is a myth. And there is nothing like oral health. This is part of the general health. So we have to respect the health of the patient when we just initiate any kind of treatment. And an additional information what we can get over the year from different studies, that malocclusion is not pathology. So we can see that non-ideal occlusion can function well from the patient's perspective. So we have an information, or we have some informations. So how can we use it if we just want to make a system in the orthodontic specialty? So first of all, I have to define that if someone disagrees with this kind of statements that I will make, it is fine. So I don't want to say this is the absolute truth. So over the years, I really wanted to put a system together because it helped me to understand what is going on. Because you can say yes or you can say no, but this is general, that patients are coming from orthodontist to orthodontist, and they get so many different treatment plans. So there is no best practices right now. And even in conventional dentistry, conventional orthodontics, and in functional orthodontics, there's so many names, so many different techniques. So there is no systematic approach at all. So we have to help ourselves. So I really wanted to help myself to understand and to make a system, but I wanted to help my patients to understand what is orthodontics, what is this type of orthodontics, how can we categorize either treatment. So this is why I developed this system, what I'm going to introduce. So when I'm talking about the new doctrine, the new fundamentum of the orthodontic specialty. These are the pillars. So actually, we have to accept the fact that orthodontic treatment is an elective medical intervention, meaning that it is not life-threatening. So we have to get the patient's permission, the patient's decision, meaning that we have to give the patient different options. The lack of the treatment is one option. We have to give the information, the sufficient information to the patient to be able to make a decision, advantages and disadvantages. But the most important part, the risk associated with the treatment should not be more than the risk associated with the lack of the treatment. So this is like very fundamental. And also, if we are treating ourselves as a medical doctor, so we state that we are DDS or DMD doctors, so we are responsible for the information what we have. If it is written in the textbook that the oral, the etiology of the malocclusion is multifactorial, it means that we are responsible for this information. We have to tell this information to the patient, and we have to address this issue. And we have to accept that orthodontic specialty is not uniform anymore, because we see there are some cosmetic treatments. There are treatments that are intending to set the angle class 1 occlusion. So this is not uniform anymore. So we have to make a new system in which the patient and the doctors can find out which and where. So this is why I created this kind of new definition, which starts with the common sense. So orthodontics is a specialty of dentistry, the oldest one. And we use appliances to move teeth and bones in order to change the conditions. So they change a setup of teeth and their bones. But the second part is containing this information, what I was telling you before, because this is an elective medical service. We are responsible for informing the patient about the information what we know, and we know it from the textbooks. So this is a multifactorial problem, and it should be addressed at as many levels as possible. So we have to give the patient different treatment options, and we have to tell the patient the pros and cons of different treatment options. And then, based on this information, the patient will make a decision, but we cannot threat or make the patient or cannot put any force on the patient to make any kind of decision. Based on the treatment objective, we can differentiate different treatment goals. It can be the aesthetics, mastication, periodontal health, or we do an orthodontic treatment for preparing the teeth for the later prosthodontic or perio restoration or treatment. And as a final goal, based on the definitions and based on the statement of the profession, so we have to add general health as a potential treatment goal or treatment objective. So this is very important. So we know that we can contribute and we can deteriorate the general health with different type of treatments. So based on the treatment goals, the treatment objectives, we can differentiate different treatment types. So I would say subcategories in the orthodontic specialty. So we can have two different cosmetic treatments because they are social 6 treatments and they are broader extent of cosmetic treatments. But there is something very important. So we have a treatment. This is the mainstream at the moment. So we have a treatment time that has the objective of fixing the structures. So we take different kind of norms. It can be either cephalometric norm, it can be cost measurement, it can be soft tissue measurement, it can be CRCO, but this is absolutely norm-based, and we work on the structures, and most of the time it is unidisciplinary. So these are the 3 features that can make a quality of the treatment what we call mainstream. So norm-based, working on the structures, and most of the time unidisciplinary. Of course, when we work with a perio specialist or maxillofacial surgeon, it is multidisciplinary, but it is structure-based. So if we have any health benefit of this, it is accidental. This is not defined by measurements. And so we have to differentiate this from the next one, because this is new and this is a health-centered functional treatment. It will have different features, I will just list it, but this is again working with an orthodontic appliance or dentofacial appliance or orthopedic appliance, but the objective is very different. So we don't want to fix a structure norm, but we want to achieve health improvement. So this is, the objective is very different. So if we want to define health-centered functional orthodontics, we should say this is a full mouth treatment, and treatment goals are maximize positive effect on the general health and minimize local and general side effects. So these are the 3 principles of health-centered functional orthodontics. And there are some features that we can add. So certainly if we want to keep this kind of, how to say, feature that we want to achieve the most general health benefit and the least side effect, we have to appreciate certain treatment directions. We have to use the lightest forces to avoid side effects. We should use the least obstructive appliance if possible to help the restoration of the tongue posture. And we should use as many neurological and biological forces and the possibilities to help the bone formation and the treatment goals. And even the most important part, health-centered orthodontists cannot be unidisciplinary. So it should be a part of a collaboration team or collaborating team. It will have a certain name, but this is part of the definition. So unidisciplinary health-centered orthodontic treatment does not exist. So we have to work in a craniofacial team. And certainly it involves the patient. So when we just want to put this kind of new subcategory into a system, we have to define the further one, which is called, which is about the treatment, the teamwork. So we have to talk about the definition of the teamwork. So this is a teamwork that consists of ENT doctors, orofacial myofunctional therapists, breathing trainers, and some functional neurologists. So actually, we have to involve all these doctors and health professionals that help to establish a nice, good function within the craniofacial complex, which help the overall health. And the name of this is called craniofacial function medicine. And when we want to put these systems together, or these categories together, we achieve a system that consists of functional medicine as the one, because we are talking about the general health of the patient. So we have to improve the health of the patient from different other perspectives rather than only craniofacial ones. And certainly we have to integrate craniofacial functional medicine into this global medical part. And certainly now this is the time that we can integrate the certain part of the orthodontic specialty into the system. So this is really something that will help doctors and patients to understand what the difference is between different types of orthodontic treatments. And then this is a new paradigm, because for so far we know that there is something that we call the angle paradigm, talking about structures and occlusion. And from the 2000, we can talk about the soft tissue paradigm, when we started to look at the soft tissues as well. And from now we can talk about there is a health or functional paradigm as well. So we develop a new movement within the orthodontic specialty that takes the health and function into consideration. So how can we use this information when we start to talk to a patient, and how can we use this information in the dental or orthodontic practice? So certainly we have to give the patient the opportunity to choose. We have to give the patient all the information that is necessary to make a decision. And we have to use the information like this. So we can make a decision between cosmetic, structure-based or health-based treatment based on the chief complaint of the patient, the attitude of the patient, other characteristics like if the patient wants to have a special appliance, finance, distance, and the occupation, the business of the patient is going to be a factor as well. But if the patient has a certain symptom, certainly it is very difficult to just neglect and say this is going to be just a cosmetic treatment. And then the patient will make a decision. But from the orthodontic specialist perspective, so we have to put this kind of process together, because we have so many ingredients, we have so many opportunities, then we have to make a system how to approach the case. And certainly we have to keep in mind that we are talking about general health. So it's very good if we have a group that has a general medical physician included, because we are talking about some factors that are outside of the scope of an orthodontist or a myofunctional therapist. And certainly symptom release is first, because it is very difficult to make an orthodontic treatment, for instance, for a clencher patient. And so another feature is going to be how to simplify the system. So, so when we talk about functional medicine is an existing specialty that is more interested in the causes, not the symptoms. So functional medical physicians are all around, so it is very good, and we can collaborate with these people. In functional medicine, we have a chart saying that there are 4 pillars of the health, and treatment should be based on these pillars as well. So we have to investigate the environment as well. So maybe sometimes the environment is responsible for the development of pain and chronic inflammation, but the other 3 are the ones that usually we can make an influence on. So we will see body balance, psychosocial balance, and nutrition as factors that we can take into consideration. So don't be surprised and by this, but we can collect those kind of treatment modalities that we have around, and we can categorize them, and we can use them in the everyday dental office. So orofacial myofunctional therapy, body therapy, core muscle exercises are the ones that help to straighten the body posture, to establish a good oral posture. And breathing is over this, because I really used another color, because breathing is much more than just setting the correct body balance. And this is the same with lifestyle and sleep. And as I found very important, the addressing primitive reflexes and left-right pain balance is very important before we set, for instance, orofacial myofunctional balance. So these are the factors that we have to take into consideration when we make a treatment like this. Simplification is going to be how we can get those kind of specialists that are collecting different kind of treatment modalities in one hand. And luckily this is possible. So we have to find someone who is going to be responsible for setting the body balance. Many times orofacial myofunctional therapists can do the breathing training as well. Life coach can help the patient to release the stress and improve the sleep. And functional neurologist can help us to set the neurological balance before we get started with the other exercises. So this is very important to set a good team. And what kind of treatments can we address based on this principle? Certainly early functional interventions, so kids having breathing problems and sleeping problems and malocclusions, and they have some additional problems, can be treated this way. There are adolescents and adults having symptoms or want to have changes without surgery, without extractions. So these are the patients or applicants for this kind of teamwork. And certainly sleep disorder patients, temporomandibular joint disorder patients. And with this kind of approach, we can help dentists to set a natural neutral bite for full mouth restorations. So within this craniofacial function teamwork, we can set a couple of different types of dental and orthodontic treatments. From the orthodontic perspective, certainly we have to address the structural issues, and ENT can help us as, again, working on the structures, and then breathing, orofacial myofunctional balance, neurodevelopmental components, stress release, and nutrition change, and lifestyle change can help us to set this core balance before or along with we make this kind of structure changes. So this is a very interesting change. I would say this helps us to establish a new type of orthodontics, and it helps to just communicate better with the patients, and helps dentists who want to enter this new field of orthodontics to set up a collaboration with specialists. But there is something else. So we are here in the BioFocus conference. We are here with the students of Viva Simoe, and I fully understand. So we have been around for many years, and I understand the concern that okay, we talk about orthodontics and dental-facial orthopedics, and this is about moving teeth and bones. But what about functional jaw orthopedics? How can we put this into the system? So I was wondering about this, because there are so many different approaches, there are so many different categories, but how can we use a functional jaw orthopedics? How can we define and put into this center. So actually, so far, we have 3 different treatment categories within orthodontics and dental-facial orthopedics. So we have cosmetic, norm-based structure-focused orthodontics, and health-centered orthodontics. But here is something. So we need some place to define what functional jaw orthopedics is about. Because the difference is, to me at least, that, that these kind of treatment modalities mostly use teeth and bones as a medium. So we put an appliance onto the teeth, we put an appliance onto the entire teeth to move jaws, orthopedic forces or just dental forces to establish a transformation within the dental bone. But what about those kind of treatments that are using all these proprioception reflexes, tongue posture, oral posture, and basal bones to make changes? So it is really somehow different. And sorry that this is the time that I'm talking about at the Vilma Simua Institute conference, but I would say that not only this, to me at least, the only treatment technique that uses different forces and different treatment objectives, but there is the ALF as well from Derek Nordstrom in the US. So these are the techniques that use the intention to change the oral function, to change the entire body function, and not primarily moving teeth. And in order to just make it clear, and in order to make it different from the ones that are appliances put on teeth or just moving teeth, I introduce a new treatment category. You like it or not, but actually, to me, again, this is about changing proprioception, changing the nervous system, changing the entire body. So we are making change on the entire body on the one hand, and we are just encouraging general health. So, so again, we have to incorporate integrate this into the entire system, that it is about health. So to me, this is more than dental orthopedics, more than orthodontics, even though it is like health-centered. So I would call it intraoral functional medicine. And this is how I would differentiate it from the other stuff that it is part of orthodontics and dental-facial orthopedics. So conclusion is that COVID changed our life very tremendously. COVID brought new trends or catalysts to trends that are going on, has been going on for many years and months. But one of them is kind of going organic. So people are getting more and more health conscious. They are looking for something like related to the health, how they can be more resilient to the different viruses and different health challenges. And especially from the economic part, they will start postponing cosmetic and prioritize health-related interventions. So this is how I believe that the new normal is going to be health-centered, and we have to use this information. And actually, over here in the BioFocus and Vilma Simua and IFUNA and different types of organizations that have been trying to stress how important function is. I use this picture from Pinterest. So this is like Vilma Simua, Derek Nordstrom, and all the other guys and people who have been pioneering and experimenting these kind of issues are like the sleeper cells, the agents that are waiting for the order. And this is now the time that we can use all the knowledge that they collected, all these very nice principles and appliances. So here's the time that we can turn conventional to health-centered, and we can integrate these kind of very nice treatments into something that we can call craniofacial functional medicine or general health related treatment. So thank you so much for joining this conference. Thank you so much for listening this lecture. If you have any question, I'm ready to talk. I'm convinced that this is the way how orthodontic future is going to be defined. Hopefully, we can make it together. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.